Coming up tonight, the Symphony hits a few clouds but spends the day at sea. We take a look at the AquaNation and we look back at the sailing as it unfortunately returns to Miami. It's all coming up, so let's set sail. Welcome to day number 7 of the cruise view from onboard the Symphony of the Seas, and today was Friday, December 7th, 2018, the final day of this sailing and the sea day. Our noontime location was 22 degrees and 31 minutes north by 77 degrees and 56 minutes west. We are currently back in the port of Miami. It is 4:10 a.m. and we have officially docked already. We are participating in a very busy day in Miami, as we saw the past 2 Saturdays as well. Currently, we entered the channel at 2:40 this morning, and by 3:25 we had already made it to the end of the channel, completed our turn down in the turning basin, and we're starting our journey back up towards our terminal. By 3:50 we were alongside, and by 4 o'clock we were officially docked again. So this sailing is now pretty much officially over, as we are completely docked in Miami, back at that brand new Royal Caribbean terminal to end this voyage. But first, we have to go through yesterday's activities, which was that sea day, and for the weather, we had a sunrise at 6:33 a.m. with a sunset at 5:20 p.m. We had a high of 80 degrees, but unfortunately we had very cloudy conditions out there. Pretty much the entire day was cloud cover, with a chance of rain, and this morning at 8 a.m. there was a rather nice shower that came through, soaked the whole ship, but the rest of the day it seemed to stay dry. Every once in a while you get just a little bit of a sprinkle, but nothing major, just a couple random drops. We had winds of about 20 knots, which is probably the highest winds we've had of this sailing up to this point. And the seas looked a little bit choppier than they have in previous days, but when you looked at the AquaTheater, it seemed like the seas were much calmer than they've been previously over the last couple days. So looking at our compass, this is the final sea day of the voyage, the last day everybody has on board to hit up whatever they still need to, do what they didn't do at this point. And we also had a busy day of activities starting at 9:30 this morning. There was a Central Park tour. Laszlo, who we met on board the Harmony of the Seas 2 years ago, is also on board the Symphony of the Seas right now, taking care of her Central Park, getting it all set up, and of course repairing it and mending it from that transatlantic voyage a couple weeks ago that really kind of threw it a curveball with a lot of significant weather situations such as snow and hail that kind of made a mess of things, but he's got it pretty much back on the right track at this point. So that was 9:30 in Central Park. At 10 o'clock, those that are interested in learning a little bit about how the Symphony operates could go to the Captain's Corner. And this was a little different than the other Captain's Corners that we've seen. It took place in boleros instead of some form of theater. Normally we see them in the Royal Theater or 270. This one was in boleros, which is a much smaller venue, but it is also a little more intimate venue, so everybody is not as far away from the captain and a little more comfortable and on the same playing field as everybody else. The other thing about it was that it was a much smaller panel. It was not the typical panel of 4 officers. It was just Abe Hughes, the cruise director, and Captain Rob up there answering questions this time.
Captain, just Derek is filming all of this. It's going directly on Cruise Critic, so whatever is being said is probably
take back everything I said.
So that was at 10 o'clock, lasted about maybe 45 minutes. And then I spent some time going through the ship, getting some footage for that cruise ship tour video that you'll be able to see shortly. be sure to check that one out. If you have not been on the Symphony of the Seas before, it will give you a complete idea what the ship is like, showing you every inch of the public spaces from the lowest deck to the top deck and everywhere in between. So mentioned previously, I did book a boardwalk cabin for this sailing, and there are a couple perks that came with that. One of them was a soda package with a soda cup in the cabin that you could use throughout the sailing. The other was a complimentary meal over at Johnny Rockets. So today was the last day of the sailing, so we had to use that up. So for lunch, took a stop at Johnny Rockets, got some of their great food there. Of course, you also had the diamond discount with the Crown and Anchor Society that gives you buy one get one milkshakes, so you can get a free meal, and buy one get one milkshakes really go in there and get a lot of food, spending very little money. So I did that about 1:30 today, and then stayed in the boardwalks at 3 o'clock. The second AquaTheater show took place, AquaNation. This one was very different than Hero. Hero was over the top graphics and lighting. It was very well done in terms of the presentation. AquaNation, on the other hand, is a very rough kind of technical show, giving you an overview of what the athletes are capable of, what the theater is capable of. It was much more of a demonstration than a show like Hero was. So if you found Hero a little overwhelming, which some people have, then AquaNation is certainly the more appropriate speed for you. Throughout AquaNation, you could also just feel the music from the other Royal Caribbean shows, everything from Spectre's Cabaret to, of course, the actual AquaTheater shows and other ships were used. It was really a whole collection of the Royal Caribbean soundtrack up to this point. And it also gave a good introduction to not only what's capable of venue, but what all the athletes are, because there are a lot of different positions and roles in the AquaTheater cast, and this show really gives you an idea of what those various roles are and who's filling them at the moment. So that was at 3 o'clock. That was the first show, and the theater was pretty full. It was every seat taken, along with the back area and up on the balconies. They had a second show at 4:30, and that one was fairly empty. It was probably about a third full in the seating, and no standing needed on that one. So that took us then to dinner, 4:30, 5:30 was then dinner, and for day 7, the final day, we had a couple items that I did. I did the traditional French onion soup, another classic item that I've done a couple times this sailing, as well as last week. For the entree, I went with the cheese tortellini, a dish I've had on many ships and always enjoy. And then for my dessert, I went with the pavlova, and I also went with the coffee ice cream that was included on another item on the menu. I got an order of that to go with it as well. And once dinner was over, we then had to head to the Royal Promenade, because at 7:30 was the Anchors Aweigh Street Spectacular. Only one showing of that this sailing. On the compass throughout the week, it's kind of jumped around what time it would be and what day it would fall on, but it finally ended up on day 7 at 7:30, and that one was surprisingly full. We haven't seen too many crowds show up for things, but this one did get a good sized crowd all around the top deck, and on deck 6 as well as on deck 5 at the floor level was pretty much filled in the front row. You couldn't really get a good spot unless you were there probably about 15 minutes or more in advance. This one felt a little bit different than the other ones. It actually felt a little more like a combination of those street parties and those little skits that we saw in the Quantum of the Seas 4 years ago. It had a little different feel than the traditional street parades that we've seen on other Royal Caribbean ships up to this point. There's a little more scripted action to it and plot to it than what other ones often will have.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for your entire entertainment family for the Anchors Aweigh Street Spectacular!
And then that started a whole night of entertainment, but for me, I had to head back to the cabin, get everything packed up, everything together to fly home tomorrow. But for those that could get out and about, there was a lineup of 3 items then. At 8:30, there was the Last Laugh comedy show starring Simeon and Robbie Prince, who were the comedians from the comedy club all week long, and they had a family-friendly comedy show. The comedy club, of course, was adult only the entire week, So for all the kids out there, 8:30 tonight in the Royal Theater, there was a show for them. And following that at 10 o'clock in the Royal Promenade, they then had holiday caroling on the street to help get everybody into that Christmas spirit as they leave the ship. And finally at 10:45 tonight, there was an adult comedy starring Simeon and Robbie Prince. So if you didn't get into the comedy club, because it is always a hard one to get into, there's very limited seating in the comedy club. 10:45 tonight, you could get to the Royal Theater and see the adult version as well. So that took us to the end of tonight and pretty much the end of the sailing, as that is the last item on the last night. So we do have one final daily dine this sailing. We've had 3 daily dines that I've tried to do on the sea days. We had a sea day today, so our third and final daily dine, we're going to take a look at a brand new venue, not just to the Symphony of the Seas, but to Royal Caribbean as a whole. And it is currently only available on the Symphony of the Seas, and that is Hooked Seafood.
Welcome to Symphony of the Seas and, of course, Hooked Seafood, our newest restaurant to Royal Caribbean. My name is Rudy. I'm one of the managers. And, of course, first thing here, we have our fresh oyster bar. All the oysters are shucked freshly for our guests, ranging from our Maine lobster, madder and crab cakes, all the signature seafood items that you'll expect. We have a nice branzino, salmon, and a full bar for ourselves. Restaurant capacity, about 90 seats, of course, throughout the cruise. You can go visit us on deck number 16 forward on Symphony. Please come and join us.
So Hooked Seafood is located directly above the adult solarium, right over top of the Solarium Bistro, and it's actually pretty much right in the venue itself, contained within a single glass wall overlooking it, so all the sound travels between the two. And it creates just a very unique environment that feels both large, yet at the same time is a very small and intimate venue. And that is an entirely new redesigned area of the Symphony of the Seas that really is a step beyond what the old Solarium Bistro was, and of course the Solarium Bistro bar, which used to occupy that space. So that is the end of the cruise view for this sailing, but first we have to take a look back at this sailing and take a look at all of the things that went on over the past week. This, of course, was the third Symphony of the Seas sailing from the U.S. She, of course, had her very first sailing over the Thanksgiving week, her second last week, and now this is her third finished sailing with a couple new port of calls. She still hasn't hit all of her ports that she'll visit in the Caribbean, so she has a couple more that'll still be first in the future. But overall, this was a very smooth sailing from start to finish. It seemed like things just flowed the way they should. There weren't any incidents this time. There weren't too many alphas. There were a couple of them, but for the most part, it seemed like this was a rather quiet sailing. Everything just kind of flowed along smoothly compared to some of the previous sailings that we've had lately, where we've had a lot of odd issues like the Coast Guard calls that we had on the Anthem. And of course, we've seen a lot of safety features on board this ship, a lot of safety policies and procedures in place with the crew, and that is something that we did not see last week on the seaside, so that is the main reason to point it out this week, because you don't really think about it or even realize it until it's not there, and then you realize just how much these things actually matter. And that is certainly the case with the Symphony of the Seas. We've seen all week things happen that just showed those policies in action, and that they actually are taken seriously and cared about, not just something that is written on paper and left there to say that it is there. So Royal Caribbean claims the Symphony of the Seas is all the classics and a couple new hits, and that is certainly the case with her. She is the harmony of the seas through and through. She feels like the harmony, looks like it. She has everything the harmony has, but she has more. Of course, as I mentioned, the Solarium Bistro, completely redesigned, way better than the Solarium Bistro on the Harmony or the Quantum class. And while Hooked doesn't really do much for me, it's a seafood specialty restaurant, from an appearance standpoint, it is a beautiful looking venue with that second floor up there. It really changes the entire ambience of this area. The way that everything looks, it adds so much extra scale to this area, and it just looks way better than the old one. It also changes the ceiling lines of the entire adult solarium where I'm currently located, because it now is so much higher. And that really changes the look and feel of this entire venue. It just feels like it's an entirely different scale. The roof feels so much higher and farther away that the entire venue just feels much more open while still having that very protected and covered feel to it. And even the adult solarium, which often gets windy on the Oasis class, doesn't really feel windy on the Symphony. This redesigned roof seems to have fixed a lot of the wind issues that had been suffered for the Oasis, the Allure, and seem to still exist even with the Harmony of the Seas. And that entire top deck has been redesigned with that new glass style like the Quantum of the Seas, which really gives it a whole new modern look. But the big thing, of course, is the food. That is where they really made the big change on the ship, changing out the Mexican restaurant on the boardwalk to Playmakers, and of course changing out Mini Bites to a Mexican restaurant, El Loco Fresh. And that was an absolutely brilliant move to do, because Mini Bites never felt like a success. The Wipeout Cafe was good, but nothing special. El Loco Fresh is huge. You walk around that pool deck any day and you just see the wrappers everywhere. People get the food, take it out to the pool deck, and are sitting there eating it all day long. It is an incredibly popular venue. I think it may be the most popular complimentary venue since the Park Cafe was introduced. And I'm sure we're going to see this start coming across the rest of the fleet, because it is definitely a huge hit at this point. And it is not really getting rid of anything, because what was served there before was never really Mini Bites. It was hamburgers and hot dogs that you can still get in the Windjammer. You can get it in the Solarium Bistro. You can get it down at the Doghouse. There are a lot of places to get that stuff, so all we've done is actually gain more food and better quality traditional Mexican food. So it is an all-around win to have that there. And then down on the boardwalk, where the old Mexican restaurant was, that was a specialty venue that you had to pay for, the new Playmakers is so much more popular. It is continuously packed. Anytime you go down there, there are people there watching games. It just adds so much ambience to the boardwalk. So beyond just being a popular venue, it changes that entire area and makes it much more utilized at night than it has been in recent years, where people just go there if they want a dinner or they go there for a show, but not much beyond it. Now there's constantly people walking in and out of the boardwalk just to check on a game and check scores. And that just completely changes the entire feel of that area, as it's now much more alive. There's actually usage of it. And that was never the case with the boardwalk. Ever since the Oasis set sail, that was always one of the biggest issues with this class, is that the boardwalk never seems to get utilized to its fullest. But Playmakers finally found a way to get people to actually go out and use that area. And then the Oasis class introduced entertainment at a scale and level never seen before on a cruise ship, and Symphony, of course, takes that to a whole nother level. We've got so many incredible shows on the ship, from Fly, with that absolutely insane scene at the end with that plane coming out over the audience, something that I think almost everybody knows about at this point, but it still is amazing when you actually see it in person. When you see that plane come out over you, everyone's expecting it, has their cameras out, yet you can still feel that excitement in the room, and almost that sense of shock when you actually see it in person, no matter how much you may know it's coming and what's going to happen. You've got Hero with the most incredible music and energy to it. I mean, you cannot watch it and not feel sucked into it, because there's just so much energy to that show, the way that the rhythm goes, the way that the flow of the entire show goes. It is just an absolutely incredible show from start to finish, and one that has to be seen. And of course, Hairspray, the classic Broadway show, the first Broadway show that Royal Caribbean had back on the Oasis of the Seas, made its comeback on Symphony, and it is a complete rethinking of the Broadway style, feeling much more like you're watching a movie. It feels more like the more recent style of Broadway shows turned into live television events where you just have that continuous camera flow from one set to another set. And you don't get that in a normal Broadway show, but Nick Weir has pulled that off with Harris Brown Where the Symphony Sees, and you just seamlessly flow from these highly immersive scenes from one straight to the next as if it was nothing. And then, of course, the ice show. 1977, the sequel to the one from the Harmony of the Seas, takes the technology to a whole nother level with brand new projection system that is more vibrant and realistic than ever before. The drones at the beginning of the show are like nothing you've seen in a show. I don't think there's any continuously operating show in the world that uses drones like this one. They've done one-off events, but not a continuously running event like this one. So that is truly unique, and certainly to have it on a moving ship. Those things are typically run off GPS, which requires it to be stationary on land. So the fact that they pulled it off in a closed-in environment on a moving ship is absolutely incredible, and it really is a scene like nothing you've ever seen before, especially on a ship. And it's just the beginning, because once that show gets going, you got all that traditional excitement of an ice show that you've got on all the Royal Caribbean ships. And we've got secondary shows. We've got 2 more shows at the AquaNation's and Ice Skate 2.0. Both 2 great shows. Neither one gets the attention that they deserve because they are always viewed as those secondary shows, but they're both just as good as the primary ones, showing off the talent more than anything else. And then on this sailing, weather is oftentimes a big story, and this one, luckily, it was never a real story because it was almost always sunny, warm, beautiful weather this whole sailing. Calm seas. We had a little bit of rockiness that one night when our hero performance unfortunately got canceled, but we never really felt the ship rocking much. It was so smooth from beginning to end, and even today, it looked a little bit choppy out there. It looked a little rougher than we've seen all sailing, but that AquaNation show, as soon as that pool was opened up, it was so smooth and calm, like there was no rocking at all. So it was a very smooth sailing. We had a couple moments of rain, but for the most part, the captain managed to avoid it all, and even today when it was cloudy out, we managed to avoid all the rain. And of course, technology. We've got technology all over this ship. We've got a brand new Royal Caribbean app. Works decently. It's better than Royal IQ in some ways, worse in other ways. It seems to work. It unfortunately still has the issue of the compass being wrong on there. Some of the items have the wrong times for like dining venues. In other places, the events are listed with the wrong time or location, which doesn't help much. So it works much better than Royal IQ. It's easier to use than Royal IQ, but it still has the data inaccuracy that Royal IQ suffered from that unfortunately makes the paper compass the most reliable way of knowing what's going on and making sure you get to the events that you want to. But it is at least a great way to check on menus and look into what a show is about, what the different specialty restaurants are. It's a great way to know what the ship is and learn about it, and it provides a very seamless experience from what you're doing at home to boarding the ship and then what you're using here. It is completely seamless. There's no difference between what you're doing at home and on board, and that is an incredible thing that just makes that transition so much easier than Royal IQ, where you kind of used the website, got on board, and suddenly had a new experience that you had to set up and connect and learn how it worked. Here, you can be completely ready and using it at home. You can already be looking at your compass, get on board, and it's just ready to go for you. And of course, there were wow bands. Worked perfectly. Seems like that's the one thing that's usually hit or miss. Some sailings have trouble, others are perfect. This was another one where I used it for purchases. I used it to get in and out of my cabin continuously, used it for shows all over the place, never had a single issue with the wow band. It worked all the time. So it's a pretty basic sailing, not a whole lot to talk about. It was such a smooth sailing. Everything, as I mentioned, just seemed to go smoothly and work, and the Symphony of the Seas is such a solid, incredible ship like nothing we've seen before. It really is the greatest ship afloat, I think, at the moment. And of course, we are now in Miami. The sailing is coming to an end. We'll be getting off shortly. But before we wrap up, we got to take a look back at our itinerary. Of course, this sailing was 7 nights. So we started off in Miami right here 7 days ago. We then had 2 days at sea and just that absolutely beautiful weather, heading down south before reaching St. Martin. And then, of course, we visited Puerto Rico, the Symphony of the Sea's first ever visit to the island, followed by Labadee, Royal Caribbean's private destination. And of course, we had that sea day coming back today with, unfortunately, that cloud cover before arriving back to Miami this morning. And right now, as we're in Miami, we are the only ship here. We just sailed down the channel, turned around in the basin, came back, and are docked at Royal Caribbean's brand new Terminal A. But right down the channel, actually, I can see her right now. The MSC Seaside is coming down the channel, and I think you can probably see it in the shot as well. She is making her way about to dock as well, and there's a whole line of, I believe, 4 or 5 more ships behind her that will be making their way, so you'll have a lot of those ships to see as well today. But looking ahead to the future, the next edition of the CruiseView will be in May of 2019, in about 6 months, as we set sail for the Ovation of the Sea's first ever Alaska season, with the first ever sailing she'll do from Alaska, the 11-night Alaskan sailing. And that is a unique one. They've just released the 2020 itineraries, and there's no 11-nighter. This is the one and only 11-night Alaska sailing that Royal Caribbean is offering. And I've been following Alaska sailings for several years now. I've seen them do as high as a 9-nighter. I'm not sure they've done an 11-night sailing before. They certainly have not done it in recent years. So this will be a new experience with a very unique itinerary that pretty much hits all the usual Alaska protocols, along with a couple sea days at the beginning and the end, giving it almost like a hybrid Alaska plus transatlantic feel, where you normally get that very port-intensive Alaskan sailing. Here we're going to get that nice blend of port-intensive period, and we're going to get some sea days at the beginning and the end to kind of enjoy the ship. And with a ship like the Ovation of the Seas, the Quantum class, so much see and do, that is going to be an important thing to make sure that we get to actually enjoy what's on board. So be sure to come back for that sailing. That will be a great sailing, a lot of scenic stuff, a lot of attention to the protocols, because it is first time I'll be at any of those ports, and it is a sailing that is really designed around those protocols. But we'll also have the Ovation of the Seas. The latest Quantum class ship, Spectrum, will be coming out about the same time, and it's already been confirmed some of those new Spectrum features will be coming to Ovation of the Seas, because most of what makes the Quantum class Quantum is digital, which means new ship comes out, all the old one gets it. So it'll be a Quantum class ship again, but we'll have some new, hopefully, Vistoramas and robo shows to look at and discuss as well in that one. So that about does it for this episode and this sailing. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, and hopefully you enjoyed the past 14 episodes of this back-to-back cruise. But for now, I am Derek Cohn. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the links.